fire hose them with it. You fire hose them with it. It's behind every video game they play. It's behind every movie they watch. It's behind every series they binge. And if you ever think, oh, what are they, is there an agenda? All you have to do is look at the past 12 years of what they put on the halftime show at the Super Bowl game. I was just trying to remember the other day when they had that great violinist play, what year it was. Oh, that's right. Never. That's all you have to do if you want to know what we're feeding our children. And so we think, well, is that good? Well, in order to answer that question, is that good? We have to know music and its impact. Because, friends, last year, the most influential piece, the most awarded piece, the most celebrated piece of music is so vulgar I won't even repeat the title up here. Now, the language doesn't scare me, but it does belittle me and you and my musicians. I'm not going to do it. Why would I do that? But yet, one day, after a concert, I was in a hurry because I had to get to another school. And so I said, can I have 2 students to help me pack up? I turned around, and I turned back around, and there was 2 third graders. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. Not what I had in mind, but you just go with it. So I thought I'm late anyway, so I was teaching them how to rap chords, and then I said to them, by the way, ladies, do you know what song, because I don't mention the title, do you know what song I was referring to? I didn't even have that out of my mouth, and one girl had the title already in the air. And then both of them started to sing the song, the foulest lyrics you can imagine. Do you know why they know the words to that song, friends? It's because they've heard it over and over and over and over again. That's called formation. They are learning to look at themselves through that music. They are learning how society looks at them through that music, through the lyrics of that music. They're learning how they look at society through the lyrics of that music. You give kids a steady diet of pessimism, they will look at life through the eyes of cynicism. Nothing's good, nothing's worthwhile, why bother? I'm not going to achieve anyway, nobody can be trusted, there's no hope in the future. You give people enough of that diet, and that's exactly what will come out of their mouths for life. You give kids a steady diet of violence, then violence is an answer to everything. It's an answer to conflict. It's an answer to prove my manhood. It's an answer to prove my respect. And when I go into the prisons, it's an absolute answer to establish who you are and where you stand. Violence. You give them a steady diet of beauty, and they look at life through the eyes of awe and wonder. You ever see a boy play with Lego? This piece is the universe. We should never lose that. Every time I sit at the piano, it's like, oh, I'm going to create just such a beautiful piece. It's just joy. So, friends, let's do a deeper dive as to who said what about music, because if music is not a big deal, let them listen to whatever they want if it doesn't affect them. Confucius, thousands of years ago, said, if you want to know the morality of a nation, let me hear the music. He didn't say, let me hear the music and discuss it with the teachers. He said, let me hear the music. Plato, the father of modern thought, said, you want to govern a nation? You don't need the laws, you need the music. Isn't that funny? Did he overspeak? I thought music was just background to dinner. I thought it was just background to my video games. He did not think so. But my favorite, Plato also said this, music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, and flight to the imagination. That's what he felt about music. I agree with him. You know how much I agree with him? I threw my life at it. Of all those definitions, the most impactful musical story that I have, I was performing for 300. So it would be equivalent to what we see in here. 300 kids, 15 years old, all tried and convicted as adults. I just played another one of those concerts last week in Washington State. Anyway, 300 kids, very heavily ganged area. Kid in the front row asking questions about the violinist through the whole show. Because when I play for kids, I'm up and down the aisles and they're throwing questions and we're just having a great time. This kid asked, how does she play so fast? How does she know where her fingers go? At the end of the show, the guard, the correctional officer, the CO, said, everybody out, let's go, everybody out. He did not want to leave. The boy stood up and said, can I hear that violin alone? I said, you bet. And she played. The boy put his hand over his heart. He threw his head back. And he started to weep. Now, when you're 15, you're not even supposed to admit that you like the violin, let alone weep. And he said, that violin's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Why have I never heard it before? That's a great question. We are the adults. We have the internet, right? We have the world library of music at our fingertips. We could have given that kid whatever we want. That boy knows everything about rap and hip-hop and heavy metal, screamo metal, punk rock, acid rock, alternative rock, grunge rock, country. He knows all about those. He knows nothing about beauty that elevates him. Why is this the first time he's so moved? Why? He's asking why. Why? Because, friends, I told him, it's your first time because I didn't bother coming in earlier. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So, friends, that's the purpose of beauty and the whole function of beauty. Maybe it went in and moved him in a way that invited him to see his humanity for the first time. And he saw himself as dignified and worthy of good and humor and joy and redemption and mercy, instead of sort of the animal that he was used to living. I'll throw my life at that kid any day of the week. When I'm dead, who's going to care about my brand and about my career? That boy is worth 10 times my brand. That's why I go in, friends. So I want to entertain you tonight. But far more than that, I want to write music that brings you joy and hope and inspiration. This next piece is a vocal and a violin duo. There's no words. It's called a vocalise. Her voice becomes like an instrument. The main themes are passed between the singer and our violinist, but there's a lot of great counter melody in the cello. Isolate all three throughout the whole piece. This piece is Promise. Thank you, friends. This next piece is a piece called Redemption. And I wrote this piece after this young boy. I was invited to perform in a prison up in Northern California. And just a little bit of the history of this boy. I was playing to a boy that had been abandoned. His mother abandoned him. He got sick, she took him to the hospital, she never picked him up. Now I'm giving that mother a pass all day long because she knew that mentally, psychologically, that there was no way emotionally that she could handle this boy. She couldn't take him to someone and say, can you babysit while I breathe? She had no help, she had no money. She did the safest thing she knew. She took the boy to the hospital, but to the boy, everything that he knew about familiarity and security were gone. He committed his crime. Now he had been in there 4 years, and we went up to perform. Now here's kind of a comical thing. They call you up and they say, would you come and perform for one boy in Northern California? I live in Kentucky. Hear all this sound? That's my gear. So what they're asking me to do, I have gear in Phoenix, Arizona. It means fly to Phoenix, rent a truck, go get all my gear, throw it in the locker. That stuff's heavy, and I'm 57. Drive 15 hours up towards San Francisco, unpack the truck, it's still heavy, and I'm still 57. Take the stuff into the prison, fly 3 musicians in for 1 kid. Put it back in the truck, drive all the way back to Phoenix, Arizona, unload it, put it in the locker, take the truck back to the rental place, and then go and then fly home. 4 days of full-time work. And if you ever want to hear what silence sounds like, just ask the Department of Corrections in California what they're going to pay you when they ask you to do all that. So they say, would you come and play? I say, sure. What can you afford? Silence. It makes no sense, but let me tell you about this kid. He had been in there 4 years, never been hugged. Nobody's ever said, I loved you. Nobody's ever said, I'm going to mentor you. I'm going to teach you a trade. I'm going to teach you, how to succeed in life. I'm going to teach you how to socialize so that you can do well, so that you'll have the confidence. And when you fall, I'm going to teach you how to get out of the mud like a man. Nobody. No Merry Christmas, no Happy Birthday. All we've done is thrown enough food at the boy. So when I asked the boy, I said, son, what's the plan? The boy said, the plan is to come right back. This is all I know. Friends, he is what's called self-condemning. He is judging himself harder than anyone any judge will ever sentence him. So when a person decides, I get letters all the time from inmates. I played over 1,000 shows in prisons. I get letters from death row. And this is what they say. My life has no meaning. Who told you your life has no meaning? My life has no purpose. Who told you your life has no purpose? I pray for people who suffer from PTSD. No God could forgive me for the horrible things that I've done. I don't know a religion alive that would agree with that, but it doesn't matter. He's not interested in the truth. He's not interested in what really is going on. All when people say that all they want to do is feed that worm that keeps telling them, you're rotten, you're no good, you're not worthwhile, you're not worth any joy, any mercy, any redemption, any goodness. I'll never forget, I was walking by after a show, the man grabbed me by the arm. In Texas, this was Ramsey, and he said, I live with the pain that I caused that family when I was 19. I said, friend, how old are you? He said, 91. I said, you live with the intensity of that pain for this long? He said, like it was yesterday. Friends, when someone decides that they are going to self-condemn, it's very tough to get them out of that mode. I'm going to share with you a very personal story about self-condemnation. 3 years ago on March 24th, my eldest son, Gabriel, took his life. Now, my son, Gabriel, struggled from Asperger's, and he had this autism. So he was always in this pain. So even as a little kid, Daddy, when is this pain gonna go? So he took his life. When I was on tour in Colorado, I got a call 2 weeks before the tour saying, would you add a day to the tour, 3 hours west of Denver? There's nothing 3 hours west. I knew that I was going to play for 15 to 20 people. And I wanted to say no, because I would already have been out 2 weeks. And friends, sometimes you're playing 2 or 3 concerts a day. You're only getting 2 hours of sleep a night. And so I knew I was going to be exhausted. And then to add 6 more hours of driving, 3 there and 3 back, didn't make any sense. But then I thought, do it. You never know who's going to be inspired by it. Just go do it. So I took it, and that was the night that my son took his life. And as I was driving home, within minutes, my wife called me. She was on the way to my son's house to give him headache medicine. She walked in his house, and she saw him on the bed, and Gabriel was to never wake up again. And that's when she called me, right in that sacred and horrible time of a mother with her son. So as I was driving, friends, within half an hour, all these arrows started falling from the sky. Arrow number 1, you knew you shouldn't have taken that last show. Remember, I didn't want to take it, and now it's haunting me. Arrow number 2, if you didn't take that last show, you would have been home. Number 3, if you were home, your son would have made different decisions. Arrow number 4, how are you going to live with yourself knowing that you could have prevented this? Arrow number 5, when your son was taking his last breath, he was looking for you for consolation. A little bit of history behind that arrow. My son had Asperger's. I always felt the need to protect him. So no matter where he went, I went with him when I was home. Hey, Dad, I'm going out with my friends. I said, I'm going out with your friends too. And no matter where he went, I would go. And he wrote me a letter 6 months before his death and said, Dad, you're my only friend. And the last arrow said the following: maybe you should join your son because he's still looking for you for consolation. Okay, friends, I'm outside Denver. It's very dark because there's no people, therefore there's no street lights. I'm so distracted, I thought, I can't drive off the road. This just is not safe. So I pulled over and I started examining those arrows. And when I examined them all, there was enough truth in every one of them for me to identify what they were associating with. It's not like I was sitting there, oh, what is that talking about? I knew what it was talking about, but you know what they were all? They were all lies. And lies have one purpose, and that is to destroy you. Lies aren't there to invite you to grow. I wasn't trying to think about deep things. I was just trying to hold on to the wheel. Lies aren't there to encourage you for humility or any of that. Lies are there 100% to destroy you. And if I drank the water of those lies that were coming at me, I could go in that corner over there and I could basically self-paralyze through all the pain, all the confusion, all the hurt, and all the loss of my son. I wasn't going to do it. I thought, I'll take those tough questions any day. I'll self-examine any day. I'll admit where I'm wrong all day long. I am not going to drink those lies just because an idea comes to your mind. It doesn't make it part of your story. It doesn't mean it's true because it comes here. So my friends who are in prison, when an idea comes to feed that worm of how rotten they are and what you've done, and don't forget who you are. You're this rotten person. They drink that medicine all day. And it's wrong. And it's wrong. Friends, sometimes this is the toughest battlefield in the world. Sometimes this playground's not very nice when ideas come that tear you down. That's not of God. It's okay to question things like, I should be kinder. Good, work on things that you're weak at. I'm a plenty to work on. I should be more generous. I should be more patient. All those things I need to work on and more. But never, ever, ever question your dignity. Here's the reality. There is this untouchable, unreachable beautiful, inexplicable, sublime, complex, and very mystical dignity that we all have. Can't earn it, can't win it, doesn't matter how rich or successful or good looking you are. It's the gift of humanity. I have a beautiful daughter with Down syndrome. The joke in my home is that when we're empty nesters, the three of us are gonna have a ball. She has it and she'll never even finish a sentence. The beauty of the human person. So friends, my son made a wrong decision, but my son was filled with pain. And I am comforted knowing that God loved my son and that God knew the pain of my son. But life is so worth living, and it is so profoundly, mystically, and sublimely beautiful and dignified. Now, that may not make you feel better or console you, but that's a reality that's worth digging for the rest of our lives, because that's the truth. And I wanted to write about that. So that's what this piece is. So musically, it's a fun piece to listen to. Two main themes. First one's in the cello. Why the cello and not the violin? It's because Alex paid me more than sung up. Sometimes you just have to be practical. Well, that's not exactly right. The first theme, basically, sometimes we have to overcome certain things in ourselves in order to live our higher life. Oh, I have a horrible temper. I'm going to go from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. I'm never going to lose my temper again. 5 seconds later, oh, look, I've lost it again. You have a choice right there. You can just say, well, that's the way I am. That's the wrong choice. Or we can say, I'm going to fight it. I'm going to cleverly think of other ways to divert my temper. But those are good fights. Keep fighting those things. And you may never conquer your temper, but there's merit in the fight. That's what that represents. The theme in the violin represents the glory of redemption. And the magic, friends, you're going to hear them play back and forth, intense, gentle, but the magic is when they're played together. Because sometimes the glory of redemption is realized in the suffering. Suffering is probably the only thing we all share. We don't all have peace or hope or prosperity, but to one degree or another, young, old, rich, poor, I play in celebrity homes. They suffer. We all suffer. But that's not always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes suffering is that brutal, ruthless, relentless, merciless, but honest and effective teacher that invites us to grow. Have you ever gone through something and thought, I can't ever go through anything that painful again. I don't even know if I can keep breathing. Keep breathing. And then when you come out the other side, you realize, I never want to go through that again, but I learned so much about life, about love, about faith, just about different things that only suffering can teach. This piece is redemption. Friends, listen for the first 2 themes. They come up in the first 30 seconds. Thank you, folks. Friends, this next piece is a spiritual narrative. I'm not going to come at this from a religious perspective, but a musical one. So, why does spirituality and music go on so well together? I mean, every Christmas we always say, oh, well, I want to hear Handel's Messiah. Handel's Messiah is played on every secular theater, on every corner, as it should be, because it's a profound work. But it was inspired by the sacred. Bach, on every sheet of manuscript, would write, "For God alone." Now, why did he write that? He wrote that. He didn't write it just sort of loosely or in a playful way. He wrote it because he knew if he approached composing music with a certain determination, with a certain prayerful, with a certain poise, that he could write beauty that sort of was worthy of the words that he was writing, and that beauty would go in and move us in ways that no words can ever touch. So let's examine that. Why does music and the sacred go so well together? I think the best way to approach this, it's almost disingenuous to talk about music and not talk about spirituality. If you're going to try to talk to somebody about the importance and the impact of music on culture and on the person, you must address the spiritual, regardless of what you believe. Look, when I go and play in these places I play, I have no idea what they believe, and they probably believe anything under the sun. So even if we believe nothing at all, I think the best way to approach music and spirituality, let's divide them. Let's talk about spirituality first. I think spirituality is the highest intellectual topic we could ever discuss, regardless of what we talk about, regardless of what we believe. Why do I think that? Because if you're going to dive into spirituality, you are necessarily going to dive into topics that hit us all in a very deep and profound way. So, for example, spiritual question number 1, what happens when you die? Now, I've never met anybody that's ever said, well, that's a good question. I've never thought of that. Friends, when my son passed away, I had to address that in a very unromantic way, but in a very real way. And when you die, is there eternal life? Is there some sort of deity or God involved? Or is that it? Well, how do you know? Well, you would know just by researching the way you would research anything. Figure out what God said. Figure out what people said about God. And then ask yourself, are there any things that are going on in culture, over the last 2,000 years that can be attributed to God alone? So, for example, I love the story about Padre Pio. Padre Pio was given the stigmata. When you have holes in your hands, you are going to get gangrene. Never got gangrene. And what's interesting is that doctor after doctor came to mock him, but they couldn't explain it. And they couldn't explain why he didn't get sick. And then at the end of his life, they couldn't explain why after he died, the holes closed up. Couldn't explain it. And so, should you therefore say, oh, well, that's God? Not necessarily, but if you can't explain it, then you should at least say, there may be divine intervention here in ways that I don't understand. Information's always your friend. To say, well, I can't explain it, but I know it's not God. How? How do you know it's not God if you can't explain it? It's like it's like I used to think this was a baseball bat. But then after I hit a few balls, it broke. And then when I spoke into it, it amplified sound. Well, now I have new information. I would be a fool to say with the new information, okay, it amplifies sound, but it's still a baseball bat. Why would I do that? It would seem logical to say, if it amplified sound, there's new information to say it's not a baseball bat, but a microphone. And the same thing. Information's always our friend. The last thing I was going to say about spirituality is that in order to be intellectually honest, spirituality involves diving into our own wounds. We all have them. I went and played in Chaco, Mexico, outside Mexico City, for 3,000 girls that were orphaned. Some were orphaned truly, and some were sold by their parents to be trafficked and to be used in the worst ways possible as babies. And then they were rescued, and then they were brought to this orphanage, and there were 3,000. And right before going on stage, the organizer went right behind me and he whispered, "You're about to go and play for 3,000 hurting girls." And I said, "Yeah, and we're going to have a ball." And then he said, "But there's really need for 3 million. We just don't have room." And I turned to him and I said, "Do they heal?" He said, "They heal because we don't let them hide behind their wounds. The second we bring up their wounds, they want to fight, they want to run, they want to change topics. They want to scream, they want to get passive aggressive, but they do not want to address their wounds. Neither would I." But after about 5 years, they slowly talk, and then they heal, and they heal. They heal. Beautiful. All that to say, if we're going to talk about spirituality, it's of the highest topic. Let's leave it. Let's talk about music. Friends, I was once playing in a prison near Orlando, and everybody in this prison was about 6'10". They were giants. I had no idea what they were feeding these guys. And so I was thinking, what is this? And people often, as I said at the beginning, they ask me, "Aren't you afraid to go in those places?" Not when I bring her. She stands up, they run, okay? So friends, we had question and answer, and this guy stood up and he said, "I've never cried in my life. I was 15 when I came in here. I'm now close to 60, 6-0. Never cried in my life. I cried during the concert. Why did I cry?" Let's talk about him, and let's talk about that boy. Remember that 15-year-old boy? Okay, friends, if I tell you a story, you know what happens? No matter what the story is, the words go to the brain. The brain downloads the information and then processes it based on your history of that topic. And you don't mean to do that. You're not even thinking you're doing that. It's happening before you take your next breath. The brain works so fast. It's involuntary. It just happens before you blink. And you're relating to it. You're not sitting there, "Oh, I wonder if I can relate to that story." No, your brain's already done the work. Not so with beauty. When the human person is exposed to beauty, it bypasses the brain. And it goes right here. It goes right to that part in us that animates us. It goes right to our real humanness. It goes right to our soul. And it cuts through all the betrayal, all the hurt, all the pain, all the neglect, all the walls, and it elevates our humanity. So why is this boy crying and why is that man crying? Because maybe it's the first time in their lives that through beauty they were invited to see themselves as dignified people, worthy of goodness, worthy of mercy, worthy of humor, worthy of leisure, worthy of forgiveness. It sees themselves. I swear to God, I wish I had a mirror. That when you look into the mirror, you don't see your face or what you think of yourself. But I'd love to see the way God sees us. I think we would all die from joy, from that beautiful vision. So when you have the highest form of thinking, spirituality, mixed with something that has access to the soul, you have a very, very real encounter with the person. This is Panis Angelicus. This is a poem that was written 1,000 years ago. Why does something last 1,000 years? Because it has meaning to the individual and civilization. If it didn't, it wouldn't last. But it speaks of the angels wanting an encounter with perfect love, the one who created them out of perfection, perfect love. I love my children, but I don't love them perfectly because I'm not perfect. But the angels have a hunger for that perfect encounter. we have that same hunger, but we don't see God the way angels do. Because ultimately in the human condition, the most euphoric expression is love. To love another, which is tough. We all would agree with that, but love is tough. I always tell my kids, the guy who fist bumps you and says, hey, love you, brother, is not the guy that loves you. Ladies, the girl that says love you has nothing to do with love. It's the one who truly sacrifices for your well-being. The one who brings you closer to goodness is the one who truly loves you. That's hard. What's even harder is to accept love. The other half. The most euphoric is to love and to accept love. How do you accept love? You go to any inmate and you say, John, I love you. And he says, no, you can't love me. Because John has been feeding this worm for 30 years. And he's been telling himself over and over that he is not lovable. And he can't receive that love. That's tough. So friends, how do you portray this in words? You can't. And the author knew it. So you know what he did? He wrote a poem. Why a poem? Because the words of the poem goes to the brain, but the beauty of the poetry goes to the soul. And that experience of the intellect and the movement of the human person elevates our encounter with Panis Angelicus. So these words are written 1,000 years ago, and the music I finished just a few years ago. This piece, friends, is Panis Angelicus. Thank you so much, friends. We have one more piece for you this evening. And before we play it, just a couple of thank yous and a couple of logistics. Number one, I would like to thank Father so much for allowing me to come. And I would like to thank Marianne Haskell. She called me and she was yeah. You know, here's what's interesting. I believe in music so much I've thrown my life at it. But yet, if people like Marianne don't see the vision and then they don't bother doing this, then this doesn't happen. And then how do we try to build up a culture? I brought the country's best performers here because I want to go in tomorrow and I want to play for those guys that don't know a violin from a hockey stick. And I want to move them in a way that they've never been invited to be moved before. But unless people like Marianne say, yes, Eric, we really believe in it, we really want you to come to our community, things like this, never happen. And, then it feeds into that whole mentality of, oh, you musicians, you just say all those things because you can't get a real job. And and that's true, but that's got... Friends, I would also like to thank very much these three extraordinary musicians, our wonderful, So friends, our wonderful cellist this evening is Alex Winter. And our wonderful violinist is Sunga Kim. And our wonderful vocalist is Jayan Kim. Thank you, friends. And one last thing. So I have a table. I have CDs, and so I'm running a special tonight. Usually I charge $300 a CD. I've never gotten it. So friends, I have 6 different ones. If you have a CD player and the music was meaningful to you, you are most welcome to go and take. I don't sell the concert. So the concert is basically what you donate, I take. And then it allows me to pay the musicians, pay the flights, pay the hotels, and so on. And then tomorrow, we go in, and no prison has ever given me a dime. And I promised myself when I was a young man, I would never charge. If someone wants an Eric Genuis concert, they're going to get an Eric Genuis concert. So on that table, So on that table, friends, there's CDs. There's also links. If you type in that link, you'll have all my music digitally. I think the links, yes, they're on your programs as well, on the back. Okay? So the information for those links are there as well. Okay? And, okay. And the last thing is, this is, as Father mentioned, it's by donation. Friends, I have to humbly ask. So, again, I don't not charge for concerts because there's a lot of money floating around. The opposite. My accountant thinks I'm out of my mind, But you know what? If I would have waited till there was money in the bank for every concert, I would have done about 1/3 of the concerts I've done. And which one of those death row concerts shouldn't I have done? There's a guy, Ramiro, he's scheduled to die on June 27th. He's saying, Eric, I really just want to live until your next concert. My next concert's on death row is on September the 5th. The last time I met Ramiro, he was scheduled to die the day before I came in. He got a last-minute stay. And when I went to his cell, because they have to stay in their cells, they're cement cells. I can only look at them through a slit. After the show, he was weeping. He said, to think I was going to die yesterday, and I would have missed this concert. So is that the one that I should have skipped because there wasn't money in the bank? Friends, if you can donate, we take credit card, we take cash, check. Concerts for Hope, it is a 501c3. There's also Venmo. I think every way that you can give is also on the back of your program. I also have the information on the table, okay? So if you want to give by credit card, I can receive credit card out there. If you just want to leave me with your credit card, you're most welcome. And the last thing I was going to say is that if you can't give tonight because you're between jobs, no problem. Don't give, but take the CDs. But if you can't give because you give to some other organization, stop giving to them. Well, maybe that's a little aggressive. I didn't want to say that. She told me to. So friends, anything you can give, your dollar goes very far. It goes to 100% concerts. What we're doing tonight, we're doing tomorrow. Okay, friends, this last piece, my wife and I have this beautiful, I've been married close to 30 years to a beautiful, supportive wife. Friends, we have a Down syndrome girl who's 20. Now, we go in nursing homes and play as a family, okay? We don't sound like this, though. My sons like to play, but they don't love it. So they practice 5 minutes, a year. Anyway, so, true story. I told my sons, I said, let's go. We're late, nursing home. Now, in Kentucky in February, it's cold. Not like this, but it's cold. So I said, get in the car. My son comes down with a cut-off T-shirt. See, he lifts weights and he likes his little muscles. So he comes down and he talks like Rocky Balboa, So I said, that's nice, cut-off T-shirt, February. Maybe you want to put on a coat. It's freezing. And he says, oh, no, Dad, no, you see, because when you got it, you got to flaunt it. I'm thinking, flaunt what, you knucklehead? We're going to a nursing home. They can't even see you. So we go and play, and I tell you, it's painful because half the time, if I was a betting man, I would bet he wasn't even playing the same song as the rest. He sounded so bad, but I can't, and I choose my audiences carefully. Why do I choose a nursing home? Because they're deaf. It's the only way. Now, I'm here. I'm visible. I can't give them a dirty look. So I consoled myself saying, no. You know what? I'm the musician. Nobody notices how bad he's sounding right now. I fooled nobody. You know how I know? Because we played and they clapped, they clapped. And then I said, friends, I have one more song for you. And this lady at the back couldn't contain herself. She yells out, thank God. That's when I knew we were completely, the gig was over. I turned to my son and I said, I love you. He said, I know, Dad. I said, but you sounded terrible. I said, maybe you hit 5% of the notes anywhere near the tune that they were meant to be hitting. The knucklehead tells me, oh, I know, Dad, but when I was playing, did you see my muscles? Anyway, crazy. So we went through the hospital to get to the car, and there was a woman who came out of a hospital room, and she was broken. And she was weeping, and my daughter with Down syndrome walked right up to that woman and crawled in her lap, which is tough because she has no muscle tone. Children with Down syndrome, my daughter's tongue hangs out of her mouth because she doesn't have the muscle tone to keep her tongue in her mouth. She walks heavy. She has no muscle tone. She could never do a chin-up. She could never even hang. She can't do a plank. There's no push-ups, 0. So for her to climb into that woman's lap took a certain conviction, and then she wrapped her arms around her neck and put her forehead to the woman's forehead. And then my daughter started to weep just as hard as the woman. Can you picture that? You know what I saw right there? I saw perfect human compassion. Perfect. My daughter didn't check with her friends and say, are my friends going to think this is cool? Because if they don't think it's cool, I'm not going to jump in her lap. She doesn't know to check with her friends. You and I suffer from the sickness of what other people think of us. But my daughter doesn't know to do that. I did not hug the woman. I did not hug the woman because I thought if I hug that woman, she'll feel uncomfortable and so will everybody else. Aren't I smart? I let my perception of everybody else's impression of me stop me from doing the greater human good. Did not stop my daughter. So who is truly disabled? Friends, I would have done anything to have that encounter back. You know why? Because we live in America, and I love my country, but, there's just one issue. Do you notice how everybody's fine? Hey, man, how you doing? Fine. How about you? Fine. Everybody's so darn fine that we have no idea the horror and the pain people are going through. That person who's so fine may be on their last emotional breath. And yet this woman was willing to reveal her vulnerability to me. And it was a real human encounter. And I missed it. I would do anything to have that back. But I missed it. I'll never see her again. And she won't reveal that again. I missed it. My daughter did not miss it. I'm walking by the woman and I'm thinking, I'll take my children to ice cream. I'm thinking ice cream in the middle of her brokenness. You know what I'm feeling for the woman? Nothing. And all I could think about was, when did I die? When did I die? Friends, I go and play the movie stars' homes. You know what is so interesting about playing in their homes is that everybody wants to have an encounter with the movie star. Makes sense. They have charisma, they have fame, they're rich, they have vision. But do you know why everybody wants to have an encounter with the movie star? It's because they're easy to love. It's that good-looking girl. It's that good-looking guy. It's the guy with the perfect body because he's a professional athlete. It's the guy who lights up all the room with his great charisma and his great humor. It's the person who's the number one on the New York Times bestseller list. They're easy to love. And then there's a whole group of people in this world that are tough to love. That are tough to love. And my daughter's one of them. I promised you that I wasn't going to turn this into a religious concert, but do give me 5 seconds. Our Lord said, what you do for the least, you do for me. He did not say what you do for the most. The most are easy to love. It's what you do for the least, because they are tough to love, and it draws something out in you that you have to dig deep. It's easy to ignore my daughter and people like my daughter. It's easy. You want to show love to my daughter? My daughter wants love like everybody else. You come to my house, you'll do one of two things. You'll have a tea party, or you'll color. And she'll color, and you're not going to talk to her because nobody wants her opinion. Anastasia, what do you think about the national debt? She doesn't know those things. You're going to get bored within a minute. And her, she'll be so happy that you are there for her. You will see what joy was meant to look like. You don't need to play the cello. You don't need to play the violin. You don't need to be a pianist. You don't need to be a singer. You don't need to be a composer. You just need to show up. Friends, charity is always the right thing to do. You know how many people show up to see my child? Nobody. And it's not because they're bad people. It's just that we forgot what we mean to each other. Charity is always, always the right thing to do. But we all have a vision of charity, right? We shovel our neighbor's driveway. That's good. He's too old and weak to shovel that driveway. The driveway's now shoveled. It looks good, and you feel good about yourself. That's charity. Do that. You want real charity? Call that son that insulted you 10 years ago that you haven't spoken to. Call him and forgive him. When I'm in the prison tomorrow, you're not going to remind them? Because a lot of their fathers were in prison. A lot of their mothers suffered from addictions, and they grew up with nobody. I'm going to say, call that mother and forgive her. No, I'm not going to call her. I'm never going to call her, speak to her again. Yeah, that's charity. Take out that uncle that's always rude to you. Take out that sister that you haven't spoken to in 30 years. Yeah, but she's mean and she's nasty. You can't control what she does. Don't worry about what she does. Well, I won't be treated that way. Be treated that way. Nobody ever died from being insulted. I never read an obituary. This person died because someone insulted them. Friends, by you sitting there and giving them your humanity, you're giving them the best part of who you are. Just being there. Oh, but they're insulting and they're weird and they're strange. When you go into high schools, why is that kid sitting alone every day? And then the cool kids, well, he's weird and he sucks the joy out of the room. All the more reason. Nobody asked you to heal him. Go and sit with him. Let him be weird for an hour. And then slap him on the back and say, thanks for lunch. I want to do this again next week. You're giving him your humanity. You may be making such an impression on that boy's life. Friends, charity hurts. Real charity hurts. Hurts. So, friends, charity is always the right answer. My daughter has it down. I'm still learning. Just because I can stand up here with a microphone doesn't mean I have all these things down. So, friends, my daughter was born with a really bad heart. She needed massive heart surgery, as many Down's children do. So I wrote this love song to her when I was in the waiting room and she was in the operating room. This is a love song from me to my daughter. This piece is called Here I Am. Friends, after this piece, we're going to turn on the lights. I'm going to go and be behind my table, and I'd love to shake your hand before you leave. This piece is Here I Am.
When your back's against a wall, victory, there seems no hope at all. I'll be your wings that soar so high, the side of paradise. Now be still until you're strong. Here I am, I'm your fire when it's cold. Here I am, I'm your guide when you've lost your road. I'm your armor in fields of war, when the enemy storms the door. Here I am forevermore. Take my hand when shadows hide your way. Take
Eric, on behalf of our Tri-Parish family and everyone else, thank you for giving us all a little space in a really weird time in our lives, in our history, so thank you very much. Now, a couple of things before we go. Our committee is now working on possibly 2 more little projects like this. So maybe at some point, some of you may want to get involved in the committee, so some of the folks on the committee can take a break. So we'll be in touch. Second of all, do you remember the story in the Gospels of the man that Jesus said, take up your mat and walk? We have to get the church back to the way it looked. So if you're sitting in the way back seats, don't touch your chairs. There will be a few people around who will tell you where to put the seats and where they have to go back. If you could do that, that would be wonderful, because then we all can get out of here and get ourselves home. And remember, we have Mass tomorrow night here at 6, 9 o'clock at Our Lady of Grace, and Immaculate at 6 for the Ascension. Just a little commercial announcement. So, thank you. Thank you.